Good evening. Welcome to the session on a day in the life of a PM intern. I'm Rohan Patnaik, a member of the PM Tech Club of IIMA and a past intern of Microsoft as a program manager. Along with me, I have Ashutosh.
Hey everyone. I'm also a former intern of Microsoft and as a program manager intern, and we are both from Ahmedabad, currently pursuing the second year of our PGP course. Here to share the experience from the intern under the title, as you have seen, which is the day in the life of a PM intern.
So the goal of today's session is broadly to take us through what a PM intern role looks like, what are the experiences that you go through, what are the things that you miss out while being an intern, what are the learnings you can go from it, and we'll cover some of the mistakes that we did in our preparation and during our internships, which can be corrected. Let's start with the basics. Ashutosh and I would like to take you through what are the key PM activities that generally most of the PM interns get to work on. Ashutosh, if you can take us through the core activities you did during your internship.
All right, thanks, Rohan. So before I discuss the activities, I would like to mention they are very dependent on the kind of project you choose, of course, right? And whether you get to choose a product depends on your team, depends on your company as well. Sometimes you're just handed a project as well. So for me personally, the project that I had, a rough outline would be, we were looking at a new market segment and a product for that market segment. So it was basically ideation and creation of a new product idea itself. So in that, it entailed me to basically move from, ideating about the requirements of the, let's say, the customers or the users of the proposed product, and eventually building that proposal over time during the internship. So over the 2 months that I had to understand the customers. If they have a multiple sites, I have to understand both sides, and then formulate, a product that would suit their requirement, and then actually share that proposal with, let's say, whoever is evaluating it. And if needed, I could also run a feasibility check with the developers that I had. So that was a gist of my project that I did during my internship. I'm assuming, Rohan, yours was a little different. So would you like to share?
So yeah, my project was more of a feature discovery on an existing product. So the difference becomes that it's a lot more constrained, and you have a target market in mind already. So that's how it will vary from Ashutosh's project. The work is the sequence of steps that you take for it is broadly similar. A core work that you do would be, because your target market is already defined. Most of my internship went in actually understanding the need of the target market and how that need can be satisfied by the application I was working on. So customer need discovery, customer expectation, and research related to that would be one of the biggest things that almost any product management role would take up. Apart from that, I think a large part of a PM's role, which kind of gets missed out, is looking at data. Most companies that you'll be working for, there's a high chance that, especially if you're working on an existing product, they'll have the data about the behavior of the customers who are already using it, or market surveys with data about how the perceptions of the various customers. So looking through the data, analyzing it, understanding what are the insights you can generate from it, uh, was probably the defining part of my internship.
Right. If I can just add, onto what we have just spoken. So you got the perspective of two kinds of projects that can come to you during a PM internship. Now there can be multiple other places which can share their projects, and which can stick to very niche part of the PM lifecycle as well, and it can also extend to the complete lifecycle. But that is usually not the case. So in the future, of course, we'll touch upon what gets missed during the internship, but it is very subjective to the kind of project that you eventually get during the intern as well.
I think one of the things that you deal with as a PM intern, especially in the first few weeks, is a lot of ambiguity. As a PM intern, when you're given a question, it's not like a product question that you generally get in your interview. It's something broader. It's a problem that you have to work on. So I would say a thing that you do, at least in the first couple of week, is actually figure out how to break down the problem and something on the lines of a root cause analysis. So there's this misconception that product is like product is a very technical role, but this is somewhere is a point that I disagree with, because the entire concept of a root cause analysis is something which is not technical at all, and it's completely driven by logic.
Right. Even especially in the case of my project, because it was very much related to just ideation part of it, a larger section of it at least. So what I was looking at was, just the eventual customers that I'm going to serve and what are their needs, and the technical limitations were not a concern at that point. So I was looking at everything that can be done to serve those requirements, which the eventual customer might actually require, in the future.
Yeah. Actually, like probably the most entertaining part of I don't know about Ashutosh, the most entertaining part of my internship was talking to customers. PM is a role where you can't go in saying that you are an introvert. You need to be able to talk to people and figure out how to ask the right questions and how to build insight from the answers that they give. Like a couple of things that courses that especially you'll do in MBA, your uh, designing surveys or marketing based things like taking user interviews. These are the things that as a PM intern, as like a future PM in general, you have to be good at, and that's one of the key learnings that you do.
Right. I mean, that's quite true, because from what I was working on, I didn't have actual customers, but I was still talking to people who could eventually be the customers. And that experience was really eye-opening as well, because you get to listen to the experiences that you might not have anticipated before. So as part of the intern, I conducted some unstructured or semi-structured interviews as well. So that gave room to, for the participants to express freely whatever they wanted. And that really brings out, a lot of uh, the things that can be worked upon in your product, and, the needs that can be served through your product. So that was a really great experience there, I would say. And as Rohan mentioned, the marketing courses that we did, we were able to leverage them very well during our internship for sure, because those came in really handy, whether it be how we formed surveys, whether it be how we conducted interviews, and how we gained insights, from these interviews and surveys as well.
So one of the caveats of an internship is it's pretty short. We spend a couple of months in it. Some part of it also goes in onboarding and offboarding activities. So we do only get to see, let's say, like 10% of what a product manager could do. So, Ashutosh, would you like to share what are some of the activities which you feel a PM would do, what generally people won't get to do in a PM internship?
Right, sure. So, as we talked about, it's just a very short while, 2 months of project that we work upon. And when you look into what the PM role entails as a larger team, it's a lot of things, right? You deal with marketing, to understand what the customer is, who the current customer is if you're working on a current product. And then you also talk to sales if you are in that kind of, let's say, B2B environment, to understand what are the current requirements from prospective customers. Then you eventually translate them, work with the designer and bring out the basic user workflows that you want to build. You work with the developers eventually and then ship it out. And let's say you have a shipped product, then you also deal with the customer side of things, of the current customer and their queries and requirements. Of course, you can't cover all of that during the intern, because that is a very long and lengthy process. A lot of, in my personal opinion, what I missed, because I've worked previously in tech for 4 years, and I've seen a lot of these sites before. I think during the internship, I really missed working directly with the developers, especially because I was working on a very early stage idea, and the only thing that I could really talk to the developers about was, is this feasible or not? So that is the only check that I had to do during my internship, and what was expected from me as well. And I would say, across the board, I think the interaction with the developers is very limited in terms of, whether you get to eventually develop the product itself, because uh, generally an internship, especially in a bigger firm, doesn't entail to actually building the product out during the course of your internship. It might be taken up later by, let's say, your mentor or your manager, but I would say generally I wouldn't classify that something, that's something that you would do during internship, like actually getting to building a product. Ron, what would you say during your internship? What did you see?
Yeah, so implementation is definitely something which, if you product managers would actually spend more time in the implementation part than the discovery, which is the more initial stage, and that's something which is difficult to experience as an intern, because for that you need to get into a team where with a product which is about to go into implementation. So and something which is like true about tech is generally development of a product is very iterative in nature. So it's never linear that, okay, you're just discovering a product and then building it. It's always a part of product discovery. Then you're implementing a part of your prioritized feature list. And then you're working on actually testing out these features and figuring out whether there are some, with some metrics, whether the product is actually working or not. So once this one iteration is done, you get back to product discovery based on your learnings from your testing phase. So for most of the interns that I talked to, we only got to work with the product discovery or feature discovery phase with maybe the initial part of implementation, and the entire implementation, and especially the product feasibility and the product customer behavior testing, which is the one of the biggest places where a product manager comes through, was something we couldn't experience. Uh, so that was my experience. Apart from that, for a lot of the bigger companies, you will have more stakeholders. You have design, you have engineering, you have marketing, you have sales, and especially from what I felt, that design, sales, and marketing, these are stakeholders you get to interact with towards the end of your product discovery phase. And I would have loved to, like, being a design person, I would have loved to talk to a designer, but that's an opportunity I couldn't get. And sales and marketing would come towards the end of when your actual product is supposed to be released. So that's another experience that, as a PM intern, it's highly likely you're probably not going to get. Second scenario is if you get into a product which is towards the closing stages of implementation, then there's a high chance that which is the case for very few interns. You might not get to work on product discovery, but implementation and working on the product improvement part after looking at metrics is something that they might get to experience. So it's generally either the early end of product discovery or the later end of product improvement. That's what I felt that most interns get to work on.
Right. I mean, for example, I remember there were projects around just prioritizing of different, product features into the roadmap of the product. So that is, even though that's a very small part of the whole life cycle, it's very crucial because you have to understand the business, you have to understand, the different stakeholders, what their priorities look like, and then prioritize from the PM team and, how they would work on it. So those kind of projects get very specific into the operational part of the PM lifecycle as well.
Yeah. Apart from that, I think writing is a big part of any PM's role. Generally, you do a lot of research and you are supposed to comprehensively document that research. And that research it's not something which will just be used in your product, but it can be something that goes on. Like I use the research of some different products and while building the product that I was working on. So generally we only maybe get to make like one presentation part of a PRD, but not an entire big research document, which is something that most the final stage of what most PMs have to deliver.
Right. Agreed. I think the documentation part is really important and have to be really comprehensive as well, because eventually this document is going to be viewed by different kinds of stakeholders as well. We'll come to that in a bit, that who the stakeholders are. But that is why, whatever you write as a PM becomes really important, because it defines how everyone engages with the product eventually.
I think we had a few questions. The first one being if product management is something that we can get after undergraduate. I think Ashutosh has some experience with it, so he can probably take this question.
Right. So it's definitely possible to get into product management right out of undergrad. Depends on the kind of placements you get at in a college, of course, and after whatever you leverage what you have done so far. It's not. It's very common to see undergraduates who have not done any postgraduate degree to become product managers. I don't think it's uncommon generally as well. The path usually is that you get into a tech firm, even if, let's say, if it's in a different role. Startups have generally a lot of, I would say, internal opportunities that come that you can leverage. Can't really say about the larger companies, because the previous work I have was in a startup. But from what I could gather was that there is definitely opportunity internally with larger firms as well, like Microsoft, Google, and others, where you can change a role, and that is really appreciated as well if you want to explore other areas of the business. So definitely possible, and it is not uncommon at all, I would say.
Yeah, in fact, I think there are a few companies who have an associate PM role specifically for undergraduates. It might be then it completely depends on whether that company comes to your college or not. So that's where your restrictions come in. But during my 3 years of working and exploring what the different roles, what I could definitely see was a lot of startups do hire people who have like an undergraduate experience in, let's say, computer science, to a more hybrid role where you can do both product management and while also simultaneously coding and building the product. Largely for bigger companies, the opportunities are a little limited, and this is completely in the context of India. So the second question we have is, does a job after undergraduate matter during your like when you're trying to get into product management? So I think I can take some I can take it. So it's definitely a little easier for people who have a computer science background, because most of the companies hiring for product management and MBA colleges are companies who are companies like Microsoft, Amazon, who are in its core like technology companies. But that's never a restriction. The actual role itself doesn't entail a lot of. You basically do not really need any amount of coding knowledge to be a good PM. As most of us, as both of us talked about, knowing the customers and having sound logic is something that's expected out of a product manager, and not knowing a particular language. The reason the companies do shortlist a lot of computer science students is because it's pretty evident that a lot of them will be more inclined towards working in a tech company, and also just knowing the jargons of like coding or jargons of technology makes it easier for a product manager to talk to a technology a tech lead in that company. So that definitely helps. But given all that, I've seen people from a non engineering background, in fact, non computer science background, in fact, even from a non engineering background, being there in there in the company I was working for.
Right. I mean, I would like to add something there, and I'll pick on something that Rohan actually mentioned just now. So he mentioned that people or companies would pick computer science grads because they, it is evident that they have interest in tech, right? That is exactly what you basically need. If you are interested in technology, even if you're not a computer science grad, it should reflect somehow. What any company requires in their employees that they love their work and are dedicated to do it regardless of any other restrictions. So there is a genuine interest that is needed, and you have to showcase that somehow, right? It should come out maybe in your CV or in your discussions or in your let's say submissions that they ask for. So that is where you can leverage your, I would say, interest and show that even though you don't belong to, let's say, a computer science background, which I did not, and all you need is basically to show that interest somehow to the company, and they will understand that you really genuinely want to work here. The jargon and the language that you speak in a tech company is a byproduct of that interest, in my opinion. So it eventually comes out because you're interested in getting into product management. So I would say product management itself is a lot of reading as well, because it's a very new field. People are trying to write a lot about it as well. So and there are really, really good reading material, both in terms of books or online, that can be leveraged for this. And we both did that during our preparation as well, and that has really helped us to actually secure these roles and also work towards them. So yeah, the genuine interest within the field itself will propel you to get a PM role eventually in the internship for sure. So that's what I would add.
This question is actually a nice segue to one of the topics that we wanted to cover. Product management is a role which has a lot of policies or myths attached to it. So, and some of these myths were what we bought into before our internship, and we actually got to know the real scenario once we started our internship. So we, like Ashutosh, do you have any of those policies which you felt that in the PM internship helped you?
Right. So I think the one thing that I mean, because I come from a PM background, so some of the policies did get quashed at that time. And I'll tell you one of the things that I had, because I previously worked on the customer side of things, and I used to think that my customer should be a priority. Why isn't this feature getting built? And when I moved on to the product side of things, I could see how many stakeholders they are dealing with, right? So there is so much to evaluate before you actually get to building a product. Specific to internship, I would say the one thing that I felt was missing was the designer experience as well. Didn't get to interact too much with the designer at that time, I think. And it's general that the overall interaction with every stakeholder is very minimal. Eventually, when you get to a PM role, I think that becomes very elaborate. You have multiple discussions with every kind of stakeholder, and then eventually build the product. So it's basically a shorter version of that experience with a few pieces missing is what I would say it was.
So I found a couple of myths which are polar opposites, but are completely a wrong way to look at product management. The first of them is that as a product manager, you are just a facilitator between business and engineering. In fact, the biggest thing which kind of shows that this is not true is the fact that uh, uh, almost 75% of my internship, I did not have any interaction with anyone from engineering. So the entire product discovery phase is something, the product ideation phase is something that you drive. So that's a myth that I felt was like reducing the aura of product management. You're actually in charge of a lot of decisions. A good way to define what product manager does is they need to make sure that what engineering, sales, marketing, designing are working on is worth it. You need to make sure that the list of features that you come up towards the end of your feature discovery phase is something that will actually be successful in the market, and your engineering is never working on something which is not tested in terms of customer usability, in terms of customer need. So it's a lot more creative than just being a facilitator between different stakeholders. Uh, Apart from that, the second extreme is you are a common phrase that is thrown around is you are the CEO of the product. Uh, that's a major difference between like a CEO and a product manager. Is as a product manager, you are not going to have formal authority over anyone. You are a part of a multi-talented team which from people across different domains, and you work on guiding them and basically showing them the direction to go to. But you're definitely not the boss of any of them. So a key skill which I felt that I have to learn during my internship was how to influence without actually having any formal power.
Right. And just to add to both the points that Rohan mentioned, I think uh, he mentioned that you are uh, basically entitled to make the product successful eventually, right? And that is what is the engineering team expecting out of you. Engineers do not want to get, or are not expected to look at business side of things every day, right? They rely on you to show them that, and you basically become a conduit, that eventually brings out it sort of connects all the departments that are needed to build a product, and eventually rely on you to understand what will succeed in the market and what wouldn't. Yeah.
That also points to how extensive product management as a field is. You need to know some part of technology. You need to know what your business goals are, how your product aligns with those business goals. You need to understand what your competitors are doing, and more than anything else, you are the champion of the customer. So it's a very vast field which will cover almost most of the fields that you'll be covering in an MBA or as a business student.
Yeah, I think what Rohan just said is that you are the CEO of the product when it comes to the responsibility, but not when it comes to the power. So you have to do all the things, but without having the formal authority on anyone that you work with. Uh, I mean, that's how I would summarize it as well.
Cool. I think we can take one more question. I think some of these questions are a little off topic, but I'd still like to take it. People wanted to know whether product management experience can help get into a top B school. I don't think that's that related. B school evaluations are generally based on your scores. It's more holistic where they look at your profile based on your undergraduate, your 10th, 12th, what you did, what your CAT or GMAT score is. So a good work experience is definitely helpful in terms of the fact that it can drive it can drive your interview, but it's not the defining factor of getting into a B school. But where it will definitely be helpful is in getting good summer internship. Generally, like at least in B schools, the schedule is pretty packed. So the amount of preparation that goes into amount of time you have to prepare for your internship interviews is less. So if someone already has a product management experience, they know how to solve the product design questions or the questions that are the product oriented questions that are given in these interviews. So for them, the preparation phase is a lot easier than someone who's new and trying to get into the field from scratch.
Yeah, I mean, if you're looking to get into MBA, would rather suggest you look at the evaluation criteria for every institute because it's different, right? So uh, we might not be able to comment on that very holistically because for IIM Ahmedabad, maybe WorkX matters more or has more weightage. Maybe it's not the case for other B schools. So uh, the best practice would be to look at their evaluation criteria, how those are structured, and how you can leverage your abilities and use them for the admission.
I think Ashutosh, you had a few questions that you wanted to cover.
You mean on the chat? Is that?
No. So
Right. Okay. So I guess we're midway of the whole session. So I'll coordinate a few other things that we had in mind that we wanted to discuss. And the first one being the stakeholders a PM engages with. And Rohan, I guess we can cover both the intern and the usual experience as well here. But if I can go first and mention what are the stakeholders that generally a PM engages with, I think we talked about them, over the last 30 minutes. But to just mention them separately, so it goes from product discovery to eventually delivering the product, and then after you have delivered, there are considerations there as well. So if you look at the whole life cycle of the product, you do get to deal with sales and marketing in the beginning, to understand what the market is like, what do you want to build, to understand the new requirements that are coming from the market, for even for the current product or for new opportunities, new products that can be built in the larger context of the company that you're working with and the domain that you operate in, right? From there on, you extract, the needs that you can identify, perhaps talk to a few customers or potential customers as well in terms of identifying their needs. Eventually get to building out what can be built for them. That work sometimes entails working with the designer as well, because they are the ones who will look at the user experience side of things, trying to understand what the user wants, and what the user says, because there's a difference there. So those need to be identified well, and after that exercise is done, the documentation part comes in, where you, along with the designer, eventually get to document what you're going to build, and that becomes the basis of for your engineering team to then understand what needs to build. Why I say your engineering team? Because in the larger context of a PM role, you work the most you work with any team is your engineering team. So they become your day-to-day contact, the people you talk to every day, understand their issues, their concerns as well. uh, you know then you basically eventually get to building, let's say, the prototype or the feature, test it out with the with, if there's a tester within your team, and eventually ship it out to the customers that need it. Once it's shipped out, depending on the kind of company that you work with, whether it's B2C, B2B, you deal with the feedback that comes from the customers, right? If they like it, they don't like it. If it's working out, you should have already set some success metric in your documentation, and you evaluate them at that point. Also, meanwhile, you deal with the leadership of the company if needed, uh, where you set their expectations right, in terms of where you are on the product, how you're delivered, if there are market conditions that have affected you or your product, while you're delivering the product as well. So that is very large context of, what PM role entails. When it comes to internship, you would want to talk to everyone, right? It is best that you get to, you take the initiative to talk to every person that comes within this life cycles, right? So let's say I'm ideating a product. It's very, really helpful to talk to the designers, because they understand the current product, let's say, or the other products of the company. It's good to talk to the developers, because they understand how your idea can sometimes, correlate with other products that are already built. Maybe you can leverage those things, right? It's good to talk to your product leaders, the ones that are in your team, because their expectations are also set on the product, on what they want it to look like. So trying to understand that is really important. Of course, you're talking to your mentor and managers as well. And eventually talk to marketing as well, talk to sales, because they understand the user from their perspective. And when you eventually get to talk to the users or the prospective users, let's say, you can relate those things together as well. So those are the larger stakeholders that you should talk to. If you eventually get into an internship, I definitely recommend that you go out of your way actually to interact with a lot of people, actually as many people as possible, honestly, in my opinion. Rohan, what would you say? I know I went on for a while now, but yeah.
Yeah, so I think this is something that one of my mentors told me, that product manager is a role where you actually learn from dialogue. There's no book that can tell you how to be that can completely tell you how to be a product manager. So the way to improve is to talk to different stakeholders, and more importantly, one part that people miss out is talking to the other product managers. So a difference between product manager as a field and a lot of other fields is you are not in most cases you're not really competing with your product managers. You are actually working with them, understanding their insights, and growing as a team as a whole. So that's where that's one person that you definitely want to talk to. That would be all the PMs, irrespective of whether they are in the team or not. My major learning did come from mostly talking to senior PMs in my team. They guided me on what are the things that I should look at, not just in terms of project. What are some of the things that I should look at to improve as a PM, and even for them, the thing that they told me to do to improve as a PM the most was to talk to different stakeholders. Uh, yeah, so I think a question we can take a few questions. One of them was how is PM different from consulting? Like I've not been in consulting as a domain, so everything I say is generally coming from feedback given to me by other people. The biggest difference from what I could see was as a PM, you are actually working in the implementation phase, whereas for consulting, in consulting, you're generally working on the ideation and the problem solving phase. So that's one big difference. I think Ashutosh, do you have anything else in that?
I would say the same thing because I don't have first-hand experience in consulting either. But I think where PM goes way ahead of consulting is actually then building out, you identify the requirements and the needs and what the market scenario looks like. And then the eventual creation part of things is what is not covered within consulting because you are a consultant essentially, right? So you're not directly working on something. In PM, I think the ownership becomes a lot higher in terms of your projects, and you eventually get to create, what you're thinking as well, and all that your analysis, let's say, talks about as well. So those are the things I would say. There are definite differences between those two roles in that sense. Right. I think there are a few questions on chat. We'll take them at the end of the session if that's okay. We have a couple more things to cover, and then eventually we can cover the remaining questions. So this is sort of looking retrospectively on the internship, Rohan. We want to look at what are the key learnings from the internship. So what would you say if you have reflected over the past 1 month? And also, just to mention, we both did it virtually as well. So there was that element too. So if you want to touch upon that, what did you learn from it?
So something that I learned, which something we also already elaborately talk about, was to talk to more people, talk to different product managers, and don't restrict your conversations to just the product that you are working on. A lot of times, the insights I got was actually from talking about different problems which are completely unrelated to the topic that I was working on. Then another thing was I underestimated how core writing is to product management. You as a product manager, you are interacting with 20 stakeholders, and you can't be physically present and be talking to them all the time. So something like a product requirement document where you are documenting all your research, all your insights that you've generated from the research, the features that you're thinking about. Uh, uh, so that becomes the source of that becomes like a golden source for some of the stakeholders who cannot reach you. So it's very important to figure out how to write in a more reader oriented way. A mistake that most of us do is when we start writing, we kind of forget that we have some assumptions which might not be so obvious to a reader. So maintaining that reader orientation while building a product requirement document, understanding what to put in the product requirement document, what not to put in the product requirement document is something that we kind of ignore while writing any of our while writing in our like first year of MBA. You get like in fact, as a business school student, you get a lot of chances to write assignments, and reader orientation is something you do not really think about a lot, but that is the defining factor of how good your requirement documentation or your presentation is. So that's a key skill that you definitely want to improve. Uh,
Yeah, I think that's quite perfectly put, because eventually what you write is going to be read by others who do not understand what you have looked at. So you have done the research, right? You have went into that space very deeply and you understand the stakeholders very well, but that is not going to be the case with others, and that's why they rely on your documentation quite a bit. So responsibility definitely becomes pretty large there. And if I talk about my key learning from my internship, I think it is just learning that the PM role is very inherently it needs you to be motivated by yourself, right? Because as as deep as you go, as long as the breath you cover depends on you. Nobody's going to hold your hand and take you in a certain direction, because you're not given very defined tasks, right? Sometimes it's just a very large context of things, and you have to work around with that. And how you go about solving that problem or that situation depends entirely on you. There are no right or wrong answers here. What you eventually get to do is how indulged you are in the process, how effectively you think about it. So it's a very self-starter kind of a role, is what I sort of got to know. And that entails both talking to a lot of people, then eventually documenting it as well, because those are things that you have to do yourself, and nobody's going to ask you to eventually do it, right? So I think that is what I would say. Like the key learning is that you really need to channel your passion for the role that you want to create something. Want to bring about a change, and I think that at least personally helps me a lot. When it comes to uh, thinking about the role or working on it, both equally, I would say. Uh,
Yeah,
yeah.
just adding on to that, especially the part about being a self-starter, that kind of comes from the fact that product management is a very outcome-oriented role. So what you do to reach the outcome is completely up to you, and you can cover whatever kind of research or whatever kind of interview that you want to do to actually reach to that outcome. So let's say if my goal is the outcome I want to achieve is improving apps usage by 10%. So as a product manager, you can kind of come up with an idea in 3 hours to do it, or you can spend 12 to 14 hours to actually come up with an idea to do it. So the thoroughness completely depends on you, and that's why it's generally a role where you don't get micromanaged a lot. Uh, Coming back to like the myth part, there's this myth that product manager is a very chill role. While you do not have to stay in office for long hours, product management comes with having a product mindset, which means that even when I'm not working in my day-to-day life, I'm looking at an application, I am looking at it from the point of view of a product manager. So that's how you improve as a product manager. That's how you run into solutions. In fact, as a product manager, there's a lot of chances that you'll run into a solution while you're not actually working and doing something else. So having the product mindset generally uh, is generally what makes a good product manager. I know the term mindset is very generic, but to define it, I think like Julie Zhou, she's a product manager at Facebook. She talks about a couple of things which are very useful in doing it. In building a product mindset, it starts with observation. So as a product manager, you should be observational about mainly through three levels. You should observe how you are reacting to the application or the technology you're using. Once you are adept at that, you should start looking at how the people around you are looking at and reacting to a product that you are working or that they are generally using. And finally, you need to understand how the world is reacting to it. That's like a large part of time actually went in looking through your Amazon reviews, your Play Store reviews. So that's how you generally understand how people are reacting to the product. So once you build an observation, second part needed to actually build a product mindset is you have to be as inquisitive as possible. So from your observation, you basically come up with a behavior, and by being inquisitive, you try to understand why that behavior happened. So this can simply be looking at data, talking to customer and understanding why they like a product, what are the things they like about a product. And so this inquisitiveness would actually lead you to building a product mindset and building the solutions to the problem that you're solving. So being a product manager and having a product mindset is a job that doesn't stop with you when you leave your office. It's something that you carry around.
Yeah, I think even when we were preparing for for the summers, we eventually ended up doing like a review of all the apps that we used or the products that we used. And what that has led to is that every time we use a new app, we end up looking at what could be improved in that, or what is affecting the user experience and those things. So uh, that's a good segue, I think, into the last part of the session, which is that the things you should do before an internship. So we'll talk about a bit about the prep part of things. So Rohan, how did you go about the time that you spent before the internship? You know, should we say after the summers, before? I mean, after we got selected and before the internship. So limiting to that period.
So one thing that did help me is a lot of reading. One thing you figure, as I said, as a product manager, you write a lot. So all the famous product managers do spend a lot of time writing blogs, tweeting, and writing content which describes their experiences and their thought process. So just going through different product managers and what they did and their blogs helped a lot, because as I said, it's a self-starter role. So no one's going to sit with you and guide you at every step. So you need to figure out what are some of the things that you would want, that you have to do to come to basically meet your outcome. So reading books related to product management, reading blogs related to product management was something that I did. Uh, Apart from that, I think this is something I kind of learned after the internship, and it was a suggestion that was given to me by a few of my mentors, that once you have a basic idea of like what product management is, what are the different things you do, you can start writing about it. So my understanding of product management as a role improved a lot more after I started writing articles about it for internally in my college. So that helps you with understanding, with like improving your reader orientation while writing, while also simultaneously improving your understanding of the role, because for writing you do a lot of research, which is again a vicious circle which leads you to learning a lot.
Yeah, I think it adds more to the responsibility as well. So you start reading more as well. So that's a good outcome to have there. I think I'll just add one thing that I did. Uh, Perhaps I think Rohan must have also done is look at a few frameworks. Now frameworks it is looked upon very negatively sometimes, that it limits you. But I think how anyone should look at frameworks is, you use that to set the base for a lot of things. So if let's say it is asking 5 whys for a problem, it's a very simple uh, concept, and you apply that, and then you understand what you can gain from it, and then you evolve your problem or your understanding of the problem accordingly as well. So it is a very good place to start, and then expand from there to more things. And you can be being inquisitive, being curious about a lot of things definitely helps while being a PM, because as Rohan mentioned, it doesn't really end when you leave the office. It sort of has to become your second nature sometimes, that you look at products, you look at services as well, and how those things are structured, how those things can be improved, things around that as well. So, Ron, I think we are towards the end of our session, so we can take the next 10 minutes to answer a few questions that came up. one was very specifically addressed to me because I have a little product management experience before MBA. So the question is, how did I use the PM experience while interviewing in Ahmedabad? So my interview personally was completely focused on my work itself. A lot of it was, trying to describe what my role is because it is still new and it's difficult to understand. And there were questions around that. I wouldn't want to go into the detail of it, but definitely a large part of my interview was focused on just that. There's another question about what are the certifications that we can do in order to prepare ourselves for the PM role. Rohan, would you be able to answer that? Do you think there
I
are any?
didn't particularly look into any certifications. I honestly don't think a lot of certifications are given value while especially over like a B school experience, at least in India. So that's that. And in terms of just to add to your point about how your experience helps in a B school interview set of thing. So while I didn't have a product management experience, my experience was in tech. So what they like, so one thing that they might ask you is what your career goal is, and I had to go and say my career goal is product management. So they do expect you to have some of the traits that a product manager would have. Like I have to be able to describe my work to people well, so that any layman, which in this case, which in like a broadman context would be like a customer who is not highly knowledgeable, should be able to understand the work I was doing well. And secondly, I should be able to quantify my work in terms of the outcomes I was trying to get into. So that's how like a product management mindset would actually help with this, because you learn how to talk to different stakeholders and answer the things that they want to hear. So that's definitely something that's what I feel as a product, someone with a product management experience can use in their B school interviews. Uh, I think like one question which is pretty useful is what are the things to learn before getting into PM? And how to prepare yourself for a PM role. So I think a lot of the things which are important for preparing for a PM role is something you use to prepare for your PM interview experiences. So I think a broader question could then be what are the things that we did for our PM and prepare for our PM interviews. So Ashutosh, do you want to take us through your preparation process?
Yeah, sure. So a lot of the PM preparation, I think, entailed, first we went through a few books which were around PM just to, create a base. And if I touch upon the certification part, they won't help you in terms of getting your CV shortlisted, maybe because certifications are not very standardized as of now in the PM role. It's not like, you do a Six Sigma and, the operations companies look at those kinds of certification. Not something similar happens with the PM role, but they can help you in developing that thought process, right? What you eventually get to do is you need to solve problems. So identifying problems itself and then trying to find solution, because there are different ways to reach to those solutions. That is what we basically developed during our preparation for the PM role. What I did was, we formed groups among ourselves you know uh, within our batch of people who were interested in the role, and we used to basically act like philosophers and think about a problem and how to solve it. That is what we eventually did, right? Every day we met and we brought a problem, and we all thought from our own perspectives on, how to solve this. And that eventually led to some, I would say, constructive fights as well, where we used to justify why our solution might be better than others. And that kind of conversation, I think, gave us the perspective of, how there are many different ways to solve problem. And that is what you basically need. You need to basically expand your perspective to solve a problem, because there are multiple ways to reach to a solution. Eventually, even if I recall my interview experience, the interviewers would constantly ask you, what else do you think about this? If there is a question, so what more can you think about it? So it's always about, how far can you think? How many perspectives can you bring to the table to actually address any situation or problem? So that is what I would say I developed throughout the preparation part of things, and uh, that is what really helped me a lot as well. Ron, what was your process like?
It was kind of similar. We started with this book called Decode and Conquer, which kind of lays down some of the frameworks, especially product design framework, which is useful. As Ashutosh said, people look down upon frameworks, but to be honest, that was the framework which kind of helped me structure the way I was solving the problem given to me during an internship. So, as I said, a product management question is, or a problem that you're solving as a product manager is kind of ambiguous. So, something like a framework helps you initially structure the work that you want to do to actually explore the problem. So, that's the starting point. If broadly you don't know what question to go and solve, the first thing as as like a future prospective product manager you can look at is what is your favorite product, why is it your favorite product, and what are the potential improvements that you can bring about in that product. And these same questions can be taken and used and like answered for all the different products that you interact with. So that's a very basic way to go about building a product mindset and preparing for a PM role.
Yeah, I think the MBA curriculum as well sort of teaches you that, how to identify all sides of a problem as well. So definitely, while you're preparing for the PM role, leverage that as well, because that is going to be a lot extremely helpful as well. There were a few questions, I think. One that we can outright mention, which is, can a mechanical engineer, become a PM? Of course you can. I mean, I'm a chemical engineer by my degree in the undergrad, and that doesn't, I would say, affect my chances in a PM role because of my interest and my previous work as well. Of course, not denying that. So that is definitely there. There's another question, where MATLAB or C++, knowing any language, could that help in your PM role? Uh, you don't exactly, you're not going to code in your PM role ever, honestly. All that it can help you with is, if you have developed, let's say, products or have worked on these languages, you understand some of the engineering perspective, and that doesn't necessarily need to come from your, from your experience within, these languages, or it can also come from just, studying about the role of PM as well. So, Rohan, what would you say? You are a computer science grad, right? So, how would you look at, a question like that?
So yeah, I think there are both positives and negatives. I think you've covered some of the positives. I think one of the negatives of being a developer is you a lot of times as a developer you have an output-oriented mindset. An output-oriented mindset would be, I want to roll out a product. I want to build these three features. That's not something which is expected out of a product manager. As a product manager, you are more outcome oriented, that hey, the features that I build should improve my customer experience by these many levels. So you have to even as a computer science grad and as a developer, I had to unlearn a lot of things before I could become a product manager. So that's where being a computer science grad can actually be a negative for you once you start becoming a product manager.
So something for the computer science grads to work on, because there is a transition in the role, right? So it's not the same thing, of course, and there are things to unlearn and then relearn as well, from a different perspective, for sure. uh, I think we'll take up the last question. Not sure how to answer this, but can you transition to a PM role after an MBA and HR? I do not know, because we haven't done specialized HR, right? So Ahmedabad doesn't really have a specialization in terms of their coursework. Uh, so not really sure. Might not be the right person to answer that question. Ron, what would you say?
Uh, yeah, again, the same thing. We do not really have a specialized MBA, and from what the only thing I can say is the role of a PM is not something for which you specifically need an MBA in terms of the skill, understanding the skills. skills of a PM can be very easily learned without an MBA. So then it completely rolls out to what the company is shortlisting for, are looking for in your CV. So as I said, if there's a way to go into a product management role without an MBA itself, there should be a way to get into a PM role with an MBA and so on.
Yeah, very rightly put. I think the last question, we can just answer that as well. How many hours do you code as a PM in Microsoft? You don't code at all,
At
unless
least,
it's for some personal project, maybe. I don't know.
at least
In
in
what
our
way?
experience, we don't.
Yeah. All right. So I think we are almost on time. So we'll wrap up the session now, guys. I hope you guys gain some insights. Of course, both Rohan and I can be reached out, either on LinkedIn or any other social media platforms. I think most accessible would be LinkedIn. So yeah, and thanks a lot for the Inside IIM team for having us on and giving us an opportunity to share our experience, of the intern and of the role in general as well. So thanks a lot there as well. Yeah, thank you. Ron, would you like to say something?
That's it. Like the key learnings from this session would be for a PM, be as tech oriented in terms of your thinking as possible, show your love for tech, and build a product mindset.
Right. Yeah, I would say the same thing. So be curious as you can. All right. Thanks a lot for everyone who's watching it now.